Hello everyone and welcome back to Field Stories. My name is Nick and I'm here with Michela today. So Michela, what's been going on? Because it's been an awful long time since I've been here. You're probably thinking, whose voice is this? I don't even know anymore.
Some strange British man. No, I know. I don't even remember the last time we've spoken in virtually, I guess I should say. But
Capacity.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. Okay, I am still in Massachusetts. I was surprised that it's winter here. We have snow and it's been 11 degrees Fahrenheit. So in the negatives in Celsius, I believe. I can't maybe
Wow,
-10.
okay. There you
Yeah.
go.
And I need to know my conversions better. But anyways, and I've still been doing field work. So that's been fun. I got frostbite actually the other day right before Christmas. And it was superficial frostbite, but actually it wasn't from field work. But for anyone who is curious, it turns into like one of those like watery boils kind of thing. It's really gross. Like, you know when like you get like a rug burn and then it just like you get a little sack of this is gross.
Oh,
Yeah, that happened. And I didn't realize it because I was like, oh my gosh, my finger's numb. So I got frostbite. That was fun. So that's a good update. And then I'm working on actually creating a note for a herpetology journal or a conservation journal about
wow.
this project that I had conducted in the summer, which I'm really, really proud about. And so I'm hoping to present it. I mean, so like pretty much we're looking at the animal being an umbrella species, meaning that if we find this animal here and it is threatened, and then we realize other animals are coinciding in the same area, that animal that has protection can also be an umbrella protection, like grant wise and conservation wise for all these other species.
Oh wow.
Did not find it to be my alternative hypothesis was not accepted pretty much. So
Oh no.
but it was still a really cool experiment. But yeah, so what's going on with you, Nick? I know you've been super busy and traveling everywhere. You know, how's school
Sure.
been?
Well, okay. So, you did a medical and a negative. I'll do one and then a positive after.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, so basically, to give some context on why I haven't been here so much. So I have been busy, but I've also been well, I've had chronic fatigue diagnosed for several years now, right? I think I have briefly mentioned it on the podcast before, but it's not something I've tried to dwell on too much because it's just no fun to talk about, right? So,
Right.
but the problem is, it became really apparent that I have it after my summer because I did quite a hectic summer in Suriname and Uganda, and basically completely and utterly burnt out afterwards.
Mm.
I was going to do my whole entire project for my final year on a film in Uganda. I was really excited about that. I think I told several people on the podcast about that, but unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. I just lost all energy, all enthusiasm, and completely burnt out. And so I spent about 3 months just resting.
Mm.
And I remember I said to my housemate, I was sort of just like, I was really down on myself, and when you're really blue and like, and it was about December time, and I just said, I'm coming back hard in February. I said I'm done with being miserable. I need to just kind of let it ride out for another month or so to get over this. But I'm going to come back hard on February, and yeah, that's what I've done. So, I have now got tours confirmed for Uganda once again in 2025 in August, and Suriname as well in November. So I'll be running my wildlife photography tours in those periods this year, which is great fun. And I actually completed my first ever presentation talk to 30 guests at a camera club, where I taught all things Uganda and gorillas and Bwindi and all the community members from there. And it was amazing fun. So I hope you're doing
Wow.
more of those.
That's
So yeah,
great.
there's a bit of positivity at the end there.
Listen, mine is not all negative, okay? I said that I'm going to be publishing a note that's
I didn't
positive.
say yours was all negative. I
No.
said you did one negative, one positive. That's what I did.
Maybe you said one medical and one negative.
So that.
I'm really glad you're doing better. And I think that a lot of us in this field completely understand or can relate a little bit. I don't know a lot about chronic fatigue, but, understanding burnout is a really big thing. And we've talked before, it's like, you got to take care of yourself. And that's a big part of, why we're maybe not as consistent, is because we're busy. We're trying to take care of ourselves. Things are tough right now in so many different ways. So we're just trying to exist and survive. And so I'm just glad that, you took the time for yourself, but, you can make it back when you can. And to have your first presentation, especially in front of, a good group of people, is nerve-wracking, but always, also exciting. Like, did it go well, I'm assuming?
It was amazing. It went so well, and they invited me back already, so I can't have done anything too bad. Everyone loved it. I got several messages after. It was beautiful. It was really cool to have that experience. I think that obviously it helps when you talk about something you're really passionate about. I could talk for hours about Uganda to anyone. I love the country, and the people I've met along the way in this country, are just incredible. And I could happily talk about it all day. So we better not. I think we do have a wonderful guest on today, and I'll let you introduce.
Yeah, so today I actually have one of my best friends coming on the podcast. We know each other from grad school, and we've remained really close. So she was like my support buddy during grad school, especially during the really hard times. But her name's Jasmine Mancuso, and she is an aquatic research analyst. And she works in the Great Lakes region in the Midwest of the United States. So the Great Lakes are a large freshwater body of just chains of lakes that are quite enormous. They're actually some of the largest lakes in the whole world. And so she is able to work in these lakes and work on some harmful algal blooms, which she will definitely talk about. But I'm just really excited for her to be on and for you to meet her. And and hopefully y'all get to learn a little bit about algal blooms and aquatic ecology. So with that, we'll have her on.
Okay. Sounds great.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Field Stories Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Michela, and I'm here with Nick, and we are finally back.
We're back.
Which is really exciting. And today I'm very excited to introduce one of my best friends, Jasmine Mancuso. Jasmine and I know each other from grad school back at Grand Valley, which seems like so many years ago now and making me feel a bit old. But I'm just really excited to have Jasmine on here today because I feel like she's going to provide such an interesting point of view and a different point of view from anyone else we've had. And so Jasmine is an aquatic ecologist research analyst at the Cooperative Institute for the Great Lakes Research. That's such a mouthful.
It is.
But pretty much she's a badass, and she's working with Dr. Casey Godwin and Reagan Herrera on the harmful algal bloom team. So I'm going to have you introduce yourself pretty much, Jasmine, and kind of tell us about your journey and, what you're doing now, how you got there, and then we'll kind of keep going from there.
Okay, well, thank you both. I guess I'll take it all the way back to growing up. I grew up basically right on the shore of Lake Michigan, so I have always loved the Great Lakes. I went to undergrad first for environmental science and kind of started working in a stream ecology lab, which was great. Loved streams, loved fieldwork in streams. And then when I went to grad school, that was a year of tough funding federally, so there weren't a ton of options around. And I thought maybe I want to step out of the aquatic world. I'd been picking macroinvertebrates for years. But ultimately the position that was offered for me was one at Grand Valley State University at their Annis Water Resources Institute studying lakes. So I stepped out of streams and into lakes, and that's where I started studying harmful algal blooms. They were not really on my radar in undergrad. It was kind of just introduced to me in the lab that I started my grad school research in with Dr. Bopi Badanda. And so we did some harmful algal bloom research on Muskegon Lake. And then after that, I went back to streams for a while, working in a stream ecology lab again, actually the same one that I worked in for undergrad, which was really nice to go back. And then after that, I transitioned back to lakes. So here I am at the Cooperative Institute for Great Lakes Research, again, studying harmful algal blooms, but this time in Lake Erie, which feels great because a lot of people use it as, a drinking resource and recreational resource. And so the thing I love most about my job is it feels like it really, really makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. awesome to hear about your journey, and I'm sure that some people can relate to that. So my first question for you is, tell us a little bit about your day-to-day, day in and day out at your current position, and the importance of what you're doing for just the local community, but the whole, Great Lakes region, really.
Yeah, so absolutely. My day-to-day is incredibly variable depending on the season, really. So in April through October, we have boats running multiple times a week, sometimes in Lake Erie, sometimes in Lake Huron, sometimes in Lake Michigan. So during the field season, sometimes you can find me on a boat, but if I'm not on a boat, I am in the lab running samples. So one of the parameters that we collect are chlorophyll and phycocyanin. We basically just filter the water down onto these little tiny filters, and that collects all of the algae in them. And so chlorophyll pigments that we extract tell you essentially how much algae is in the water, and phycocyanin pigments tell you how much of that algae is cyanobacteria. And cyanobacteria is the type of algae that create the toxins, that create these giant blooms that cause problems. So we need to turn those parameters around within just a few days of collecting them, because then we push that data out to, water resource people, DNR, DEQ, or Eagle, whatever it is now. So if I'm not on a boat, I'm in the lab trying to get those samples turned around very, very quickly. And if it's not the field season, I am usually at home or at my desk working on data analysis, papers, data management, the kind of restful part of science. And what was the second part of your question?
How your work impacts the Great Lakes watersheds and why it is important, which I feel you kind of did answer, especially talking about cyanobacteria, but if you have anything else to add to that, go ahead.
Yeah, I will put it, I guess, into a little bit of more historical context. So starting way back in the 1970s-ish, Lake Erie was having just a ton of problems with harmful algal blooms, and the lake was eventually just declared dead. And so the Great Lakes in Canada kind of came together, and they said, we need to do something about this. We need to fix this. And so the International Joint Commission, they established these guidelines for how much phosphorus could be dumped into the water, because there have been a lot of experiments that show that when you dump nutrients into the water, that's what causes the algae to grow out of control. So they cut off these point sources of phosphorus, like wastewater treatment plants or detergent factories, things like that. And that cleaned up the lake for the most part. But then 1990s, agriculture started ramping up. So now we have nutrients from agriculture pouring into the water, and these harmful algal blooms started happening again. But this time they were toxic, which is, of course, a much bigger problem. So then cut to 2014, and we experienced the Toledo water crisis. If you don't have the right equipment, you're not going to be able to tell that these toxins are in the water. And the Toledo drinking water facility didn't yet have that equipment. And so all of a sudden, over 500,000 people's water is not usable. It's toxic. The city of Toledo is kind of in panic. And so that's essentially when the Cooperative Institute turned its attention to studying harmful algal blooms and working very closely with places like the Toledo water intake plant on figuring out where these blooms are located, when they might potentially move towards the plant, and then when the plant needs to take more actions to, treat for that.
Wow, okay. That's fascinating. You got a follow-up question for that, Michela? Or
I was just going to say, for our viewers that are not from the US, that the Great Lakes are this really large body of fresh water in the pretty much the middle of the United States and then of Canada as well. It's kind of conjoined. Just for in Lake Erie is just one of those lakes. I believe there's 7?
5.
Am I right? 5. I knew that. I'm from Michigan. Anyways, but yeah, just wanted to give our viewers just a little bit of information on that.
Well, I did not know that, so thank you.
Right.
I was aware of the Great Lakes, but I wasn't sure on the exact details. So yeah, I've got a few questions. I'm going to layer them, and we may take it in turns, but I think it will sort of unwind as I ask them. I think. Am I right in saying cyanobacteria is what would be commonly called blue-green algae? Just a sort of quick one.
Yeah, that is right. So cyanobacteria are actually a bacteria. They were the first photosynthesizing organism on Earth. They're the reason that we can exist on land. They produce a ton of oxygen, which is fantastic. But I don't quite remember how this goes, but they essentially absorbed the ability to photosynthesize. So they are a bacteria that acts as an algae and they photosynthesize. And the type of, or the length of wavelength that they emit makes them look blue-green. So that's why they're blue-green algae.
Okay, well, that's really cool. So, basically we have a real big problem with that here in the UK. So especially where I am, quite terrifyingly, one of our reservoirs has a pretty awful, what we would be calling blue-green algae. But I did do a tiny bit of research into it and obviously found out it was the cyanobacteria. Just if you could just give a broad idea of what's going to be happening within that lake system and sort of surrounding areas because of the sheer abundance of this cyanobacteria. Just a general overview would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm understanding your question right, basically, what is the impact that the cyanobacteria have on the ecosystem? What's the problem?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so one of the key highlights of cyanobacteria is that they have the ability to scavenge for nutrients and use them very well. And so they grow just disproportionately fast compared to other algae. And they end up forming these giant blooms. A lot of them are also, they have a buoyancy control feature. So during the day, they can move up in the water column and scavenge all the sunlight. And then at night, they can move downwards in the water column and scavenge all the nutrients. So while they're up there at the surface during the day, they're effectively shading out everything below it. So other algae that like to hang out a little bit lower down in the water column because maybe they don't like such intense sunlight, or the plants that actually grow, from the bottom, those are all going to be shaded out. So that's another competitive advantage they have. They're also, so are you familiar with zebra mussels?
Not so much.
Okay. Another invasive species that does an incredible job of filtering the water. So they actually make the water a little bit too clear, but they spit cyanobacteria back out. So they're not necessarily palatable for other things that eat algae.
Where are they found, just to get some context? Is it across the globe that these mussels are found, or is it specific to areas that you'd be studying?
They're invasive in the U.S., so I think they're all over the U.S. at this point. Yeah, they like hard structures in the water. So that's another problem with cyanobacteria, is that they're just not eaten very easily. Sure. Another thing that cyanobacteria can lead to is something called hypoxia. So we have a ton of algae. Eventually that algae is going to die and it's going to sink to the bottom, and then the bacteria down there are going to go to town starting to decompose this algae. But while they're decomposing, they're using up the oxygen in the water column. So then you have areas that have no oxygen in the water, and everything needs oxygen, even water creatures. So then you have areas of dead zones where animals can't possibly live. You have massive fish kills. So it's like a cascading effect of what.
Wow. Okay.
And then it also, you can't swim in the water either, right? When we have these huge, can you kind of touch on that too, how it is a safety for, a human hazard?
Yeah, so depending on the cyanobacteria, they produce different types of toxins. So you have some that are just irritants to the skin. So you might come out with a rash. You have some that when they get aerosolized in the air because of boats or whatever, and you breathe them in, that'll be a respiratory irritant. Some are toxic to your brain, your liver, your kidneys. They can cause acute gastritis. So they're different toxins are bad for different organs in your body. So overall exposure to them is not good. It's been known to kill dogs, kill livestock. There was one instance where they accidentally used water contaminated with cyanobacteria for dialysis, and it killed people.
Oh wow!
Different country, not the U.S., but yeah. So it poses a lot of very real threats.
Wow, that's crazy. So the reservoir I've been talking about, so the reason I'm pushing this one is this is amazing timing for me, because I'm just starting a project where I'm making a photo book of the reservoir specifically. I'm doing a deep dive into it, and I'm really fascinated because obviously the main bulk of this habitat is the lake, and it's really quite inhabited with this blue-green algae cyanobacteria. So that's just for context why I'm really delving into this, because it's quite interesting for me right now. So there's a lot of dog walkers who come to the reservoir, as it's a beautiful location for where we are. So you mentioned that obviously they're extremely toxic to dogs. What would you say is the general knowledge of the public basically on the effects of blue-green algae or cyanobacteria? What's like the general consensus? Do people know about this?
I think I have a very skewed and probably not very realistic view of who does and doesn't.
It's probably a horrible question, actually.
Everybody that I've come in contact to knows because I tell them about it. But I think that if you live in the Great Lakes region, especially if you live around Lake Erie, you know, because it's in the news. But otherwise, I think if you don't live near a lake and you don't see the signs posted up that say, you know, blue-green algal like bloom, don't swim. Yeah, I'm not sure that it's widely known knowledge, because I think just the concept even of algae is kind of difficult to grasp.
I know that it's very common in a lot of shallow areas because it's very easy for these lakes to warm up, and obviously in addition to nutrient loading, which they feed off of that warm water. So I think that because we've been seeing more frequent, at least in the Midwest, more frequent beach closes or you know, areas where you can't swim anymore, I think the knowledge is spreading, whether they know it's from cyanobacteria or you know, from duck feces or whatever, you know, they just know that the water is not habitable. So I'm hoping that people know a little bit more, or at least are just a little bit more aware. If they know the process behind it, I really don't think so, but you know, it's hard.
You know, I say people in the Great Lakes probably know about it, but then again, you know, when we're out there collecting samples, even in the middle of a nasty scum, like there's people boating and there's people swimming at the beach. So, you know, and I've heard a lot of people say it's just algae, it can't hurt you. And I think that's a logical conclusion to come to, certainly. Like, who would think this algae is producing a poison?
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I think, yeah, it's not an intuitive thing. So I think that the signage and you know, public knowledge is a good thing to keep pushing out.
Absolutely. Well, I think you were very eloquent in answering a lot of these you know, questions, Jasmine. And what I kind of want to go into now is, you know, obviously your job is very essential for not only the environmental health, but human health as well. And so when we are seeing these harmful blooms and we're seeing them more frequently, what management decisions are being taken based off of your research and your data collection? And, you know, how are the, you know, specific organizations managing these situations outside of just closing the beach down?
So that kind of goes to like farming and agriculture. And I think for a long time, there was kind of this notion that like farmers are the enemy, they're destroying our waters. But farmers are not the enemy, right? We need food.
Yeah.
And their livelihood depends on creating and growing that food. So to ask them to change their practices is kind of it's a risky thing for them to do, because if they've been doing the same thing the same way there for generations, why would they listen to somebody knocking on their door and saying, hey, can you put your pesticide or your fertilizer down at a different time of year or in a different way or in a different place? Why would they listen to that, even if they know that it's causing issues literally downstream? So Ohio has done a really good job at this with their H2 Ohio program, where they have incentives for farmers to start following these best management practices for laying fertilizer down. So they're essentially subsidized by the government. So, hey, even if your crop fails a little bit, you're still covered while we're kind of figuring out what works best for you and your farm. So at like the highest level, we have these like nutrient loading, and I can't think of the exact acronym for it, but it's essentially a nutrient loading limit for each water body, how much nutrients are allowed to go into that water body per year. But it's really, really hard to track down every single source and find out how much is coming from each of these sources. And there's really no way to just kind of completely lay the law down on farmers, because there's so many of them, and it's not necessarily super fair to them anyway. So a lot of it is just like good faith or incentivizing. So, we come up with these limits of this is what we want. This is how much phosphorus that we want to see coming into Lake Erie. But then on the enforcement side of that, it's a lot of just trying to work with farmers and see what works best for everybody.
Yeah, well, is there any possibility that there's natural nutrients that would get caught up in that surveying as well? Is it as well? So that sounds like an impossible task, really. I don't envy you and your team, if you like, on trying to get that. That's fascinating. I mean, what do you think? What do you think is? This might be another difficult question. I apologize, but what do you think is the steps in the right direction that we can take out? Like, is there a global effort, or is it like, because you said like farmers aren't the enemies? Is there other things that can be done, like as a collective? Obviously everyone's saying about recycling, doing different things that as a global initiative. Is there anything that could also help rectify this situation, or is it more localized?
On like the person-to-person scale, like the individual scale, there's of course things that you can do. Like if you live on a lake or if you have a storm drain near your home, be mindful of fertilizing your lawn. Maybe don't put fertilizer down right before it rains, or don't put fertilizer, within 20 feet of the shoreline, or don't just put tons and tons and tons down. Just put as much as you need. Or if you have a pet, because of course there's nutrients and animal waste too, pick up after your pet. So there's things that people at the smaller scale can do, but outside of just trying to prevent nutrients from washing into the water, I mean, with those best management practices, something that would be essential and is very difficult to do is create more wetlands, because wetlands are just like amazing. Like they're so good at filtering, right? There's just these like nutrient hungry plants that just kind of put a buffer between humans and the water, and they suck up these nutrients before they even get to the water. But people love living right on the water. So and creating wetlands once they've been destroyed is a very difficult thing to do.
God damn it. Yeah, that's crazy. Michela, have you got anything to add to that about the wetlands? I'm sure you do.
Oh, I have tons of things. I mean, it's funny. I just went to a conference about some bog turtles, and we were just talking about restoring wetlands, and it was actually kind of coinciding with the incentivization. I say that right? Incentivizing farmers. And so what we were doing is, hey, you can use this land for your cows, and actually this will stampede over some invasive Phragmites, for instance, which is an interesting method, but here the farmers are getting benefit for their livestock, and then we're getting benefit for almost like a natural grazer and like a mower, really, of this specific habitat that has been overtaken. And so we've been seeing some anecdotal positive, evidence that that's been working. But at the same time, I absolutely agree. I think people don't realize how important wetlands are. I think that they have a narrow view of what wetlands are, and wetlands are such a complex type of ecosystem. There's so many different types of wetlands, including isolated wetlands, which have lost its protection. And wetlands are so vital because not only do they protect our lakes, but also they provide us healthy drinking water. They provide us healthy, clean air, carbon storage. There's so many different benefits. And so when we destroy wetlands and then we, incentivize someone to create them, it's not the same process. It takes a long time, and they might not have the same ecological functions, and they may just not be as successful. And it's just really difficult to do because the soil is so complex. It depends on the wetland. You can't just be like, all right, I'm gonna plant a whole bunch of aquatic plants and expect this to just suddenly be a wetland. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. But as scientists, I know that we are we're trying to continue to, I guess, advocate and really just educate, people about these wetlands. And obviously I'm a big lover of them just because, a lot of the animals I study, occupy them. But yeah, I mean, talking about, communication, does your organization do any outreach? Do you do any outreach? I know when I lived in Michigan, I used to work for the DNR too. And just like you had talked about, I think, like you said, there was a point where everyone thought farmers were enemies, or maybe on the biologist side. And because of that, especially like 80s, 90s, there was a really large gap of communication between the biologists and the farmers, and they hated each other. And that has been passed on till today. And I remember when I worked over there, I would have a ton of commercial fishermen or farmers or think I was like someone who's going to be reprimanding them immediately when I just want their information or I want a fish head. And so I realized how us as the new generation, how important it is for us to communicate. And so I'm curious about, the efforts on your end of how, because I think you're wonderful at, speaking about what you're studying and for the environment. You articulate yourself really well. And so I'm interested to see, the efforts that you have done like individually or through your organization.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to do more like community outreach and education. That isn't a part of like my direct job, but we do have outreach and education positions at the Cooperative Institute where people do make a huge effort to, be a presence on social media. We do a lot of some of our scientists do interviews with, news stations and stuff like that. We've had people come out on the boat, like news people come out on the boat with, our field crew to do interviews and get pictures and get the stories. So there is increasingly an effort to make connections with the public. But I mean, just doing this podcast is very exciting for me because it's really nice to be able to just talk about what I do and hope that some people hear it and they learn something. But yeah, Sigler is really making an effort towards public education.
That's great.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, well, you're doing a great job. I mean, it's very topical. Obviously, we tend to have more of the wildlife conservationists on the podcast, so it's really, really cool to see just that other side of it, the part that people aren't going to be thinking as much of whilst we're talking about obviously turtle conservation, rightfully so, and all these other things. We need to know the full picture. So this is what it's been fascinating. And talking about that, I am extremely curious. Have you got any more questions, by the way, Michela?
Yeah, actually, I do. Before we jump into the next part, but I think that this is a very unique position. And so I think that whenever a lot of people consider going to conservation or ecology, they're not really looking at working with algal, algae or just with the water itself, with understanding the chemical composition. And so, I guess, do you miss field work? How much do you enjoy your job? I mean, obviously, we all have days where we don't like our job. And for those who are interested in this, because I think you're very successful at what you do, especially at such a young age, what advice would you give to younger scientists, especially during kind of a tough time in the United States?
That was a lot of questions rolled into one.
Maybe you could just answer whatever you remember.
Yeah,
whatever's easy.
Absolutely. No, they're all fantastic questions. I'm trying to think of what I want to answer.
I think said, have you got any more question?
You should be like, question, Mick. I feel like this is like our normal luncheons. I'm like, Jasmine, I miss you. And then, answer all no.
So I think you're right. Like algae and like nutrient cycling and stuff is not the glamorous part, I guess. Well, maybe not even glamorous, because what part of fieldwork is glamorous? But it's not the part that excites people. But I would challenge everybody to look in a microscope at water, like a good microscope. Look at water. Look at how beautiful diatoms are, how cool algal structure is. Even just looking at pictures of like diatoms under a microscope or whatever, you'd be amazed at how absolutely gorgeous algae is. And I think that's when I truly kind of fell in love with it. It was the first time I looked at algae under a scope, and I was like, oh my God, they're not just little like green circles. They have structure and they are so pretty, and they each have their own function and their own things that they're good at. And I think, if you look under a microscope, you can really see how beautiful it is. As far as people getting into this field now, I think that people will hear a lot of, it's not a good time to enter the field. There aren't that many jobs available. It's a difficult time. It's tumultuous. But I think right now is kind of when we need people to protect the environment the most. This is not where we back down. This is where, we roll up our sleeves and keep pushing forward. So if environmentalism is something that you are truly passionate about, it can be in your life in any capacity. If you want to have a stable, career and a good stable job, environmentalism is tough for that. So maybe you do something else and environmentalism is your hobby. Or maybe you implement that into whatever you're doing. You incorporate it into it, because environmentalism is not just for the environmental researchers. It's not just for professionals. It's for everybody. So, keep your options open. Maybe go wide, get skills and talents in a lot of different things, but always kind of keep that environmentalist hat on your shoulders and use that to drive your decisions. And if you really want to be in this field, you can do it. Like, I think we're all kind of testament to that. You just have to work really hard. But, use your passion to drive those late nights in grad school.
Wow.
and lean on your friends.
Yeah.
And lots of coffee.
Lots of coffee. Yeah.
Well, I think you just made some incredibly great points and some really relatable ones, especially for me, who's just about to finish their degree before that last one, but has also had the chance to look at water under a microscope. And we found some tardigrades, which was cool, and I managed to film them, which was epic. So I 100% advise everyone to somehow get yourselves on hold of a microscope. We're very lucky where we are, but if you can, and then just find yourself. We literally just found, I think it was just a bit of moss with some water on it, and we just found tardigrades and all these other living creatures that were just moving around. And fascinating video. It's really, really cool. And then, obviously the final point about environmentalism and how everyone could make that a part of who they are to some degree, whether it's a full-blown career, side hustle, or, just a hobby. You go and volunteer on the weekend and get involved with something like that. Mm-hmm. That would be epic. I'd love to do that if I was out in one of the Great Lakes. But so I thought we'd just move on to the field story, which I'm extremely curious about. Because obviously we tend to have people on who are like fighting bears and stuff like this, but I think this one I'm very curious. So if you could just fire away with the field story of one of your experiences, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I texted a bunch of old coworkers with this question. I was like, can you guys think of something that was memorable? Because I'm listening to your podcast and people are like, I jumped out of the water just in time for a shark to come up. And I'm like, wow, I don't have anything that exciting. But my coworkers came in handy and they gave me several options. And there was one that's just really adorable. So when I was in grad school, I worked on Muskegon Lake, which is a decently sized lake and also a drowned river mouth. So basically it's the Muskegon River flows into the Muskegon Lake, which then flows into Lake Michigan. So it has, a pretty good current going through it all the time. And we have this buoy in the middle of the lake. It's an observational buoy. So it has a meteorological station on top and then a string of sensors throughout the water column that give us a whole bunch of data. But we have to go service this buoy, naturally, because everything breaks in science. And so, we take our boat out to the buoy, and we know from past efforts that this buoy is prime real estate for ring-billed gulls to make their nests. So we got one of those owl things, that you see on docks or that are meant to scare off birds. And we put it right on the buoy because it never works. But we put it on the buoy because we thought, whatever, it'll scare off the birds. So the next time we go there, there's a nest right next to the owl. They're using the owl as support. And I'm like, okay. So then the bird lays eggs in the nest, and we're not going to move it because I'm not sure that's legal. And also it's just kind of cruel. So we'll work around it. And the next time we go out there's the tiniest little baby ring-billed gull, and it is fuzzy and spotted. I didn't know they were spotted, and it's so cute. But we scared it, and it hopped out. And it's this just tiny little thing in a big lake with waves, and it is floating away. And so we thought, okay, we will do our stuff really quickly, and we're going to go find this gull. So we did our stuff, and then we're setting out for this gull. And if you've ever been on a boat, you know how hard it is to spot something in the water and keep your eye on it. But we found it, and we took a bucket, we scooped it up, and we came and we dumped it back into its nest, and it was so cute. And I hope it made it, but it was probably the highlight of my grad school fieldwork.
Wow.
That's so cute. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I have tons of pictures of this teeny little gull in a red bucket.
That's so cool. Oh man, the baby gulls are the cutest things in the world, by the way. I remember I had a really lucky experience with one as a photographer, and I was in this so my friend has a penthouse. It's they rent them out, etc., like Airbnb type of thing, and it's a glorious location. And we're up and they've got a balcony out the back that looks out over the water, and then they all one out the front, and then they all one out the back. And I'm just there. The bathroom is like fully window glass, and there's like a bath set up here. And then I was just having a bath, and I look out to my right, and there's a gull chick, like a newborn gull chick, like literally this far away from me, like just like a half a meter away from me, just on the balcony, like with the see-through glass. Probably thinking, what on earth is going on here? Because I don't think it'd be rented out for a while. And then I managed to get some really cute photos and videos of the mum feeding it and all of these things. It was, like you said, spotted and so cute. They are really adorable creatures.
Oh, that was a great story, Jasmine.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And I guess before we probably wrap this up, do you have any other, comments you want to make for anyone? Anything else you want to say?
I guess I just want to echo that protecting the environment is more important now than it has literally ever been. So just whatever you can do, in that vein it's a good thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so happy that we got to have you, and Nick got to meet you. So I'm just really glad that you're able to share, your voice and your experience as a scientist and environmentalist, and, just share your passion too, especially for these new budding scientists that may be worried. And I think you did a wonderful job at, creating this positive light of how important environmentalism is, and, that you can do it. So thank you so much, Jazz.
Yeah, thank you guys. This has been so much fun, and nice to meet you, Nick, and good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you too.
All right.
Well, this has been really fun. So thank you guys for this opportunity.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, we will see you next time, and bye for now.
Bye now. Thank you.